Hello, Michael.
Those countdowns always get a laugh out of us, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They do. How's it going, sir?
It's going well. How are you doing?
Good, good. We got a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about. Um, but I have to start. You've been on my mind because I went to two fairs over Labor Day weekend. Even though I was sick, I went to the Geauga County Fair and then I went to the Canfield Fair. And you, who I associate with the Canfield Fair because you're like a Youngstown nationalist, you didn't go. You weren't there. You were in
I,
DC with
I
the
was
like
there.
the liberal
I,
elites and the drinking champagne. Like what's going on? We got to start the episode with some real talk. What's going on there,
yes,
Michael?
yes. So first, welcome everyone to episode 43 because I got to get that in for
Yeah.
the podcast audio. Anyways, yeah. So I did go to the Canfield Fair. I went on Wednesday actually. So
What?
yeah,
Is it
yeah,
even
and
open
actually
Wednesday?
it was open, and my oldest son got first place or something in some art show. He has a he's a little artistic there. He's an artistic athlete. Uh, Interesting mix, and he won first place, and so we were there for that. But I only got myself a cinnamon roll. That's all I ate. So
Yeah.
let's. I'm curious. When you go to a fair, what
Yeah.
is your go-to food?
Oh, I don't like the sweet stuff. My wife and I differ a little bit here. I'm going to give you the whole rundown of my family. Graham and Robin are, Robin's the newborn. She's too little. Scarlett and Alexander are aligned. They love con candy and anything sweet. I don't think they share the same passion for Dippin' Dots as I do, but they like sweet stuff. My wife likes corn dogs, so she always gets a corn dog and she'll get some sweet things. And then I like the salty fried stuff. That's my weakness. I'm an overweight man. I'm working on it. It's not because of sweets, it's because of salty things and fried things. And I like the French fry buckets. Like, you get this bucket of
Oh,
fries and
geez, how many calories are in those?
oh, like a million, right? And although, as I've been aging, I've been craving like the pizzas and the pastas at the fair, which is kind of weird. Like, it's hot out and you're eating pasta. I don't know. But I'm the French fry bucket guy. I'll do a corn dog. I don't mind a corn dog. I don't like the Italian sausage. I don't like eating Chinese food at a fair. Um, but yeah, I'm the corn dog type of guy.
That's
What about
fair.
you?
I usually don't go to the fair, to be honest with you. I'm not a
I
big
don't
animal
believe that.
person myself, so I don't really go for the smells. I'm more of an Italian festival kind of guy. As you know, there's a lot of
Oh,
Italians here in the Mahoning Valley, so I enjoy Italian food the most. And you don't know
okay.
necessarily what you're gonna get at the Canfield Fair Italian wise, unless it's like one of the ones that's actually at the Italian festivals. So
Yeah.
I try to stay clear of that. And yeah, all I had was a Molnar cinnamon roll. It was
Oh yeah,
delicious.
that's a thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was a solid dessert for me. So I was a big fan of that. They actually had it at one of the Italian festivals I went to too. So I got to have two of those this summer. That is
So,
my only real dessert I enjoy.
um, I haven't had a cinnamon roll. I used to have Cinnabons. I don't know if that's still in business. But
They are.
you know, the Canfield Fair actually and this podcast go together, and I'll tell you why. Because the Canfield Fair is like ground zero of the Trump revolution, and I remember growing up, the Democrats had a booth right by the grandstand, and their booth was one of the biggest. They had all their
Correct.
Democrats there. They just dominated, and the GOP booth was small. And in the last 15, years or so, the Republican booth has grown and grown and grown. And there's enthusiasm, there's energy, there's tons of people. I feel like there were 50 Trump vendors this time at the Canfield Fair, and the
Yeah, there were a
Democratic
ton.
booth is just like empty and deserted. Last year I went, it was totally empty. This year it was a little bit populated. There were some people in there. There were some boomers and some attendees. I'd say there were around 10 people. But if you compare the energy of the two booths, it's off the charts. And of course, Donald Trump came to the Canfield Fair in 2016, I want to say. And he flew in
He
and he
did.
attended, and that was symbolic. It was like when he came to that Canfield Fair, it was like the Mahoning Valley had shifted red. So I always associate the Canfield Fair with politics. We have a buddy, you know him, Jack Doherty, and he's an intelligent guy, but now he's working for the Libs. He's become a Democratic Party apparatchik, and he kept hyping up the Mahoning County Dems. He's like, "Oh, there's so much enthusiasm for Kamala. There's so much enthusiasm for Kamala," and I think he was telling the truth. But then I went to the booth, and it was like, "You're a couple old boomers," and I'm like, "Oh, this is really it?" And then you go throughout the entirety of that fair, and it's just it's an ocean of Trump signs, right? Like it's just totally Trumpified. But anyways, so I just had to make that observation, Michael.
Yeah, it's a good one. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about that later in the episode, maybe when we go in the polls, and I'll kind of give my thoughts on where Ohio stands, although it's not really a battleground this time, but I'd like to get into that. So, on tonight's episode, we're going to talk about the state of the race. I actually had 57 days, but it's actually 56 days until Election Day. And I think early voting was going to begin here soon or already began in North Carolina, but there's an issue with RFK being on the ballot, so that's on hold. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about where things stand in the polls. As Dane likes to say, I'm a polling nerd. If you follow MV Red Podcast on X, you see that I'm a polling nerd. I'm real into that sort of thing. I find it fascinating. So we'll get into that. We'll preview tomorrow night's big debate between Kamala Harris, Kamala. Again,
Yeah.
I'm not sure the correct pronunciation, and Donald Trump. And we'll probably talk about a couple other things throughout the episode. So let's just kind of set
Springfield.
things up.
We have to talk
Springfield,
about
Ohio. Yes, I have that further down under the state of the race because maybe we could fit it in at any point, Dane. So
Yeah,
whenever you
yeah,
want to get into that.
we'll weave it in. Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about the state of the race. It's been about a month since our last episode, and in that time, over the last month, there's definitely been a surge of enthusiasm and money that has poured into Kamala Harris's campaign with her VP pick, Tim Walz. They have a distinct cash advantage right now. As at the end of August, they had $404 million on hand compared to 295 for the Republicans and the Trump. And so that's a considerable number, especially knowing that money's going to be poured into advertising and getting out the vote in a lot of these swing states. So nothing to ignore. But throughout much of August, Kamala Harris's poll numbers rose. And over that time, there's some questions there. Was it response bias? Or just more liberals picking up the phone and answering polls, and it kind of skewed the results a bit? And are we now starting to see that subside a little bit? But anyways, Kamala Harris kind of took a bit of a lead in the national polls, which isn't surprising because it's hard for a Republican to win nationally in the popular vote. But she also started taking a slight edge in enough swing states that kind of gave her the edge in a lot of the models out there that we saw. However, of late, I would say, we had a complaint maybe a month ago. You didn't really know the direction of the Trump campaign. Were they staying on message? Trump's going after Kemp in Georgia, and yes, he went to that black journalists whatever convention, but it was just
A forum.
forum. Again, you give him credit for going into these hostile environments, but it's one of those risky situations, and you gain a lot from that type of thing. We could debate that, but it seems of late they've been more on message. And what's fascinating is, in this time, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have done one debate or one interview. May I add? Correct myself there. One interview with CNN. They were together. It was, nothing special. Wasn't the greatest interview of all. It was recorded, even though CNN had live in the corner. But in that time, Trump and Vance especially, has done a lot of interviews with the mainstream media where Donald Trump's taken an interesting approach with a lot of his interviews. He's going to these large podcast channels, or I guess they're channels, and reaching out to a different type of voter. I'd like to think it's a lot of these guys he's been on are more have an audience, probably more our age. I would say between 25 and 40, probably a lot of younger men. And
Yeah.
I think he's trying to get those younger men out for him to win him over, and hopefully, you get enough of an edge with the male vote because you're going to lose the female vote. But if you earn enough of the male vote, it might be enough to push him over the top. So that's kind of where we stand, 57 or 56 days out from election day. Although early voting is going to be starting here very soon. So where do you see things stand, Dane?
Um, what's it say about modern women that their number one issue is abortion? Like, what does that say about them? Have you ever really thought about that? I'm not going to go into this here, but it's very interesting. Our society happen to love women. I'm married to one. I love her very much. I think she's a great exemplar of women. But like in our society, we're allowed to apply positive things to women as a group, right? We're allowed to praise them as a group, but we're never allowed to criticize them as a group. I find that a very interesting dichotomy. Like we want to support women leadership, we want to support women in business, women in STEM. We say all these very positive things about women, but we're not allowed to do the opposite and criticize them. And for men, it seems almost like the exact opposite. Like people are very critical of men as a group, and they love to slog off men, but they never like to praise them as a group. I don't know. I find that a very interesting dichotomy. America treats certain groups unequally. Certain groups are allowed to be treated with kid gloves. Other groups are not. And that's not to say that women are all good or all bad. Women are human beings. They're flawed and perfect creatures just like men are. And they have their benefits and their demerits. But anyways, um, the race itself. I think, Michael, like, look, what did I tell you a month ago? Didn't I say like the polls would tighten from where we were a month ago? Didn't I make that prediction like exactly 1 month ago?
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, didn't I say that? Am I crazy and misremembering that? That I said like, yeah, wherever the polls are now, Kamala's going to come down and Trump's going to come up, all else equal.
And you also nailed her raising a lot of money still. I wasn't sure if she would be able to, but you said she was going to keep raising that money, and sure enough, it's happened.
Yeah, well, like no, like so there's a lot going on. I think the Trump campaign does have a message. It's disciplined. It's about immigration, inflation, crime, the border. They've been really good. I have to say, JD Vance has been particularly good as a campaign surrogate. And I think like he didn't really expand the map, but in terms of saying stuff that are gaffes, like he hasn't done that. He's been very on point. He's been very disciplined. He's very aggressive in his hammering of the Harris campaign, and like he hasn't really had any verbal flub ups or anything like that. So he's been a very disciplined messenger for the Trump campaign. He's done a good job, I think, and that's something that's not as well talked. I think that the Trump campaign of appealing to young men is a good one. It's a brilliant one. Our society currently shits on young men and leaves them like no potential. Like especially young white men, we tell them that they're the root of every single problem. Um, and then we also ask them to go and serve our military, which is interesting. Um, but I think that's a good campaign. So I think that's starting to make a little bit of a difference. But I think like overall, you know, a lot of what happened was Democrats were dispirited for Joe Biden because he was senile and he's a bad president. And then they had somebody new and fresh, and like some of that was AstroTurf, the Brett Summer and the Harris enthusiasm. But I think some of it was genuine. They had somebody new and fresh. And then there was like this realization. It took them a while, but it's like, oh wait, there's a reason why she's been hidden in a basement as the VP. And if you look on paper, she's a woman, she's mixed race, she's a former prosecutor, a former senator. Like she should be much more prominent, but they like kind of hid her. And the reason why they hid her is that like when she's on the campaign trail, people think that she's an alcoholic because she says stuff that's just incomprehensible. Is kind of gibberish. I don't actually think she's an alcoholic. I think she has anxiety, and I think she just stumbles over her words. But anyways, all that to say is that like wherever she was, that wasn't a sustainable path, right? She was coming back down, and Trump's been doing a good job. I actually think I was talking about this with a friend the other day. I think Trump's actually run a very good campaign. Trump has a lot of negatives associated with him because he's Donald Trump. But if you look at the messaging discipline of 2024 relative to 2020, which was a terrible campaign, and relative to 2016, where it's like every week Trump was saying something that was a gaffe, the campaign has been remarkably consistent. And moreover, it's in the polling. So I think this is a good segue, Michael. So I'm going to make a point. You tell me where I'm wrong or where I'm right, okay? So you
Okay.
fact check me. You're going to be the CBS News. So 2016, the polls were off by like 6 points or 5 points or so. Okay. And the story then was that there were all these Trump voters that weren't answering the polls. Like they were out there, they were white, rural, working class people. They weren't answering the polls. And so that depressed Trump. 2020, though, and then they said in 2020, they're like, oh, we fixed that. We fixed that. So the 2020 race comes around. And the 2020 race shows like Biden winning Michigan by like 8 points. And he won by like 1 or 2 points. And he showed him winning Wisconsin by like 6 points or 12 points or something really ridiculous. And he won by like a point. Um, and it showed like Trump up like 2 points in Ohio, maybe even showed Trump down in Ohio. Trump won Ohio by like 8 points. So there was like an even larger undercounting of Trump in the polls. Trump won. And they said in 2020 they fixed the issue of 2016. So let's fast forward to 2024. Then I'm going to turn it over to you. So in 2024 they're like, look, we fixed the issue. We've corrected it. We're now polling things correctly. And now Trump is like tied in the polls nationally and in swing states. But what if, allow me to raise the question, what if that systemic problem that they said they corrected for in 2020 but didn't, that existed in 2016, what if it still exists in 2024? And maybe it's not like a 5 or 6 point gap. Maybe they have corrected it somewhat and it's like a 3 point gap. But if they're undercounting Trump's support by 3 points, then he's like going to win in a landslide in the electoral college, let alone the popular vote. So that's kind of the thought that's in my mind. So tell me, fact check me, Mr. Fact Checker. What
Oh, this is
talk
right
to
up
me
my
about that.
alley, Dane.
Yeah,
I
I
think
do. Perfect segue to you, Mike.
the easiest way to prove your point being accurate is look at the popular vote polls in 2016 and 2020 versus now. How many, if any, popular vote polls had Trump up in 2016 or 2020? Probably, definitely none in 2020 because Biden was up a massive margin, and in
Yeah,
2016, I mean, I could look. Maybe you could find a few here and there, maybe throughout the summer. I don't know, but there's been a substantial number of polls just on the popular vote, which again, that's not how we elect presidents in the United States, but it's important insofar as Republicans have a disadvantage in the popular vote. They have an advantage in the electoral college, and if Trump is polling tied or even ahead in the popular vote, to your point, Dane,
yeah.
he's going to win. You're not going to lose if you're a Republican by winning the popular vote, and then somehow you're going to lose the electoral college. It's simply not going to happen. And it was interesting yesterday. New York Times Siena, who apparently is this top-rated pollster, although some of their state polling in 2020 leaves a lot to be desired. Anyways, they're graded at A+ by whoever. I guess it's subjective in my eyes. I don't really know how they earn that grade. Anyways, they come up with Trump +1 in the head-to-head against Harris, or Trump +2 with the full field. And alarm bells start going off in the Democrat camp because they know. Let's just go back. 2016, Clinton won nationally by like 2.1 points or something like that. She lost the electoral college. 2020 rolls around. Joe Biden wins it by over 4 points. He barely squeaks by in the electoral college. I mean, if you think, you had probably 3, 4 states decided by less than a percentage point. So he squeaks by in 2020.
Yeah.
Fast forward to now, 2024, and you have New York Times come out yesterday, +1. You have Pew come out today, tied, or Harris, another one tied. There were two other large sample ones that came out today with the race tied. And I think alarm bells are starting to go off from the Democrat side. They had that polling high, that campaign high, that rush of enthusiasm and energy throughout August. And, Dan, you kind of predicted this, but it seems like this honeymoon starting to subside. And I want to play a clip real quick from Mark Halperin. Now, what was Mark Halperin's issue? Was accused of like sexual harassment, or
I
what was
met
his?
Mark Halperin at Bloomberg back when I used to go on Bloomberg TV. I was like, "Hey, are you that guy?" And he's like, "We were in the makeup room," and he's like, "Yeah, I am that guy." And I
He
was
is
like,
that
"Oh,
guy.
wow." And I couldn't
Uh,
remember his name because he's like a C-list celebrity in the political world, but he like sexually harassed a couple of women, which
yeah.
is not good. Don't do that.
Yeah, not good. Anyways, he's starting to kind of make some
There's some
waves
public
on
polling
the
already. There's
on the X Twitter circuit with his daily election updates. I want to play this. This is from last week. I remember actually watching this right before I went to the Canfield Fair last Wednesday, or a week ago Wednesday, whenever that actually, yeah, it was 11 days ago. I got all these weeks screwed up. Anyways, let's just listen to this 1 minute clip from Mark Halperin because it's pretty interesting.
there's some public polling already. There's more coming, and there's some private polling that suggests that nationally in the battleground states, she's not ahead. She might be ahead on paper, but well within the margin of error. And there's some battleground states now where I think Donald Trump's on this trajectory is going to be ahead. And it may be, regardless of what happens in the interview and regardless what happens in the debate, it may be that by the middle of September, when things have calmed down, when the Trump campaign have had time to prey on some of the weaknesses that I suggested, that he's ahead in all the Sun Belt states and ahead in Pennsylvania and competitive in Michigan and Wisconsin, which would be roughly where Joe Biden was before the debate, with a single path to 270 electoral votes, the 3 Great Lakes states and Nebraska too. And that'd be a scary position for the Democratic Party to be in from mid-September through Election Day.
So again, that was on August 28th. He was hinting that whoops, yeah, I had to turn that off. He was hinting that he was starting to see some internal data there, some public and private polling that started to show maybe some different numbers and what was coming out with a lot of these polls. There was like one up in Michigan, like Harris up 11 or some bizarre number, which we all know is never going to happen. And you're starting to see it. And then you have Nate Silver, who many on the right are not big fans of. But again, it's just a point of reference that you could use in analyzing polls and all that. Is his model all of a sudden in the last 2 weeks flip flop from Kamala Harris having about 55 to I think 58% odds of winning the election, and now as of earlier today it was up to like 63, 64% for Trump. So a lot of moving parts behind the scenes, Dane. And I mean, what do you attribute that to? Do you think it was just like an issue with response bias, or do you just think now that it's post Labor Day, people are starting to focus on the election? You start seeing all these signs out in people's yards. It's in the focus. She's only done one interview thus far. They seem to be hiding her. What are your thoughts on that? I'm curious.
I don't think normal people think about politics in August. I think weirdos like you and me and some other people think about politics in August. So when you had Biden off the ticket, which isn't it kind of crazy, just as an aside, that he is too senile to run for president, but he's not too senile to be president. And like he said, he can't run, but we never got the explanation as to why. I find that very interesting. But anyways, um, I think that nobody pays attention in August. There was a fresh face, and I think that a lot of people that don't follow politics are like, "Yeah, I'm voting for Kamala. Yeah, I'll vote for Harris." And then I think after Labor Day, and leading up to Labor Day, people start to focus on politics. People really start to focus at the end of September. I think they make up their mind probably late September, early October, and they started to look at Harris, and they're like, "I don't. She doesn't have that good of stuff." And then the other thing about Harris is she started to, for the first few weeks, she had this like blank canvas that you could kind of paint yourself on. And then she started to release her policy proposals, and her policy proposals were pretty universally criticized. Like on economics, she wanted to give everybody $25,000 to buy a house, which is kind of mind boggling because it does nothing to increase the supply of physical homes. it just gives you $25,000, right? And so the sellers can just easily raise the prices by $25,000, and you're no better
Exactly.
off. Another one of her policies was a tax on unrealized capital gains. So if you buy a stock for $10 and it goes to $15, but you haven't sold, you've got a $5 unrealized capital gain. And currently, you only pay taxes when you sell it for 15. You pay taxes on the profit, the difference between what you bought it for and what you sold it for. What she was proposing was a tax on unrealized capital gains. So you'd have to pay a tax even though you haven't sold it, you haven't received any liquidity for it. And it was only applying to people with 9-digit net worths. And the critique was like, yeah, this might be a bad idea. I don't even think people even really defended the plan, but they're like, yeah, it's a bad idea, but it doesn't apply to you, Mr. Middle Class. And I think the middle class rightly sensed that a lot of ideas that applied initially only to the rich, like the income tax, eventually trickle their way down to middle class families. Right now, everybody pays the income tax, and when it was first proposed in 1913 or whenever, it was only the upper income brackets, right? So these ideas, once normalized, are expanded. Inflation pushes people up, and then it falls upon the upper middle and then the middle. So all which is to say, I think that she started to come out with policies. People started focusing more. Trump and JD have run a very disciplined campaign, and I think it's all come out against her. And I also think it's the Haitian thing with the cat eating. Haitians eating cats. Although that's recent, that's the last couple of days. But maybe we'll get into that in a moment. But I think that's why the race is tightened. I do have a question for you though. What do you think explains the gap? Because if you look at the national polling, Trump's either a point or two ahead or a point or two behind. So it's showing essentially a tied race in the public vote nationally. But in the swing states, we have these wild disparities. There was a poll out today that showed Trump up in Georgia, but down in North Carolina, a state that even voted for Mitt Romney in 2012. So what explains the disconnect in your mind between the popular vote and the state level vote? Like I can't figure that out.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because again, to what I said a few minutes ago, in 2016 and 2020, there really wasn't polling out that showed Trump ahead. And it kind of makes you wonder, like it honestly makes you question some of these state by state polls. Because as you referenced, these pollsters missed a lot of these states even in 2020. There were very few that they got very accurate. So it begs the question, if right now these states are there's what 5 or 6 states. I mean, you can see it on the spreadsheet, Dane. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like 7 of them are what 1.5 points or less right now.
Yeah.
And if in pretty much all those states, if the polling is off what it was in 2020, Trump wins all of them. And it leads you to question, like, okay, if Trump's polling ahead or tied nationally, how can that be? Why are we not seeing it so much in the swing states? I think there's just something there that they're missing. I don't know how to explain it because you're not going to just make it all up in California and New York. You're just not. So you're going to have to see these states shift a bit more to the right. The question is, will it be enough? And if you're looking at those states, and I'm going to put up a map here in a second.
Yeah, we need a map.
The only one that actually went for Trump was North Carolina. All of these other ones are Democrat states that Joe Biden won. So,
Yeah.
They're on the defense. And so if nationally we go from, let's just say Kamala Harris wins the popular vote by 1 point, which I think is a reasonable thought, just based on just the electorate, how things are in this country. That would still be a 3-point swing from 2020. So if it swings nationally 3 points, you're not just going to make that up in California and New York. You're going to have to see these swing states shift a bit more. You're not just going to see Ohio drastically increase. You might go from 8 to, let's say, 10 or 11. You might have Florida go from whatever it was, 3 or 4 to maybe 5 or 6. But that's still not enough to make it up nationally. So these swing states, in my eyes, are going to have to swing. But I'm also, as I'm going to put up a map here in a second, I'm also trying to be conservative because I've been burned in the past.
Yeah, I know. I'm fighting the same. I just want to pause there. I'm fighting the same enthusiasm. So what race is that? What is this map?
So this is just a map that I put together yesterday of where I see if the election were held today, if I honestly wanted to put, a substantial amount of my own money down where I think this race could be if we got all the results in tonight, this is what it would show. It would show Trump at 281, Kamala Harris at 257. And here's some people might be surprised with some of these things, but again, like I said, I'm being conservative. There's been plenty of polling out in Nevada that has
Yeah,
showed Donald Trump ahead there. I just have my doubts. It's kind
me
of been
too.
fool's gold a bit the last few cycles. There's been some positive polls out in 2022 there in the Senate race,
I
2020,
agree. I agree.
2016,
I agree.
and then the
Preach it.
early vote just looks it's just too big of a margin for the Republicans to come back against, and they fall there. So I have my doubts about Nevada. I'll give the Republicans. I think they're going to win these Sun Belt states. I do think the other ones, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, I just feel as though it'll be enough. Again, if the electorate changes from +4 for the Democrats to +1 this cycle, you're going to see a shift. And I think that'll be enough to, I mean, remember, Arizona, razor thin. Georgia was razor thin. North Carolina was a state he won, but it was just by like a single point. I think he'll win that. So then you go to that big blue wall, and right now, I do feel as though it's been remarkable how many polls have showed that race either maybe Trump +1 here or a tie or Harris +1. The RCP average right now has it tied actually.
Yeah.
That just wasn't the case in 2020 and 2016. And
Yeah.
remember, some of the most substantial polling misses were up in the Rust Belt, right? I mean, you see it in Ohio both years. It was huge misses in polling in the Rust Belt. And so, assuming things are tied right now in the polls, you'd want to be on the Trump side, right? I mean, just knowing past history and forget just about Trump being on the ballot. Just generally speaking, which way do polling misses usually go? Like who's usually benefits in the polls that are pushed out by the media? The Democrats. And when the actual results come in, it benefits the Republicans. So there's that discrepancy there. And so I think Pennsylvania, that's where I would put that Republican. But then you had two polls out in the last week in Michigan with Trump up, two media polls from that state, which again, these are remarkable things. So like part of me honestly wonders, Dane, is it really going to look more like this come election
Yeah.
day?
Right.
There, in the back of my mind, I just don't want to go there because I don't want to get my hopes up. But part of me honestly questions, how is it that he could be neck and neck or maybe even ahead nationally and not win all those swing states?
So Michael, you're like me in that, if you remember back to 2012 in the unskew the polls, right, where they would take Mitt Romney polls with Obama, and then he'd be behind a couple of points, and then they would unskew them, and they're like, well, actually, let's apply the electorate that it's going to be. And if you apply that electorate, Mitt Romney's winning this and this and this, right? And I was a big unskew the polls guy, right? That's embarrassing to admit, but I was. And then Mitt Romney got trounced. And then like in 2016 was different, like with the polling. 2020, it was just ridiculous on how the polls were like 80 points ahead for Biden and like Oklahoma. And you're like, come on, this isn't realistic. And then, it was much tighter than that. So I totally agree with you. Like part of me wants to say, if you're Trump, you're winning every single time. In fact, I would say if you're Trump and you're behind by up to 2 points, I'll be very conservative in a swing state, you're probably going to win that swing state. But I'm afraid to make that statement because then I look like a Trump booster. But if that's true, if what I said is true, that if you're Trump and you're behind up to 2 points, you win that state, then that means he's winning North Carolina and Georgia, like you identify. He's winning Arizona, where he's already ahead in. He's winning Nevada. He's winning Pennsylvania, where he's tied. He's winning Michigan. He's winning Wisconsin. And somewhere like Virginia is competitive.
Yeah.
One thing that's kind of sticking in my craw is the fact that Virginia has shown several polls now where Biden's been ahead by 3 points. Now, I think Kamala. I think Kamala's probably going to win it. But if it's that tight in Virginia, then something is going on in this race. So I agree. I think it looks. I mean, I like where Trump is right now. I feel good about where Trump is. I will not tolerate any despair or whining or anything. Like, stay focused, continue to work. But I like where he is.
Yeah. And if you're a Trump supporter, you just have to ask yourself this question. Wouldn't you have died to have these polls where he's at right now in 2016 and 2020? I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh,
if
right.
you would have told me last year when I wanted no part of Trump being at the top of the ticket that this is what it would look like nationally, I would have thought you were completely insane. I would have said there's no chance. And yet, the other big kicker here, Dane, is I see from the Democrats, especially in the last week, with some of these national polls, look at the percent of the vote that Trump's getting because they say, oh, his ceiling's 46%. Well, now you're seeing some polls push it up to 48 or 49%, which again, if that happens, he's going to win this race.
Yeah.
There's just no way he's not going to. And so, yeah, and I'm just being conservative saying Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada are going to go blue. But part of me honestly wonders if this popular vote margin remains within a point either way going into election night, or even quite frankly a point and a half, maybe even two, I feel very confident that Trump's going to win. And I would not be surprised if he sweeps through the blue wall again like he did in 2016 and makes things ultra competitive in a Virginia, in a New Hampshire, in a Minnesota. Again, I don't want to get my hopes up. I think I'm being conservative with the 281, 257. I think this is the most likely path at the moment. But I did see something yesterday. There was something cool on, I think, 538, and it just says, that kind of gives you different scenarios, Dane. And if you
Yeah.
just click a state one way or the other, like what do you think would happen here? And then how does that impact the rest of the race?
Oh,
This is
they
how
have
critical
that?
Pennsylvania is. You click Pennsylvania for Trump, his odds of winning immediately go to 80%. So that's
Yeah,
how
that's the thing.
important that state is.
Yeah. Are you going to help campaign in Pennsylvania this year?
Well, I'll be in Pittsburgh in a couple weeks for a football game. Maybe I could wear some Trump merch. I don't
Yeah,
have any.
you got to help. You got to help the cause. It all comes down to Pennsylvania. It's truly the most important state.
Yeah. And I will give credit. I think it's that Scott Pressler guy. He's got like the long hair and everything. He's
Yeah, what a weirdo.
registered a lot of Republicans in Pennsylvania over the last 4 years. And I don't think you could overlook that fact in a state that was super tight in 2016, super tight in 2020. And that could be key when it gets down to it. That edge that they used to have in just straight party registration has gone down quite a bit there. And
Yeah.
so we'll have to see how that plays a role. But if I'm Pennsylvania and I'm like the Republicans that are strategizing, I would go all out to turn out rural vote as crazy as possible. I would be hammering. I don't know what their early vote is there compared to like Ohio. I'd be going all over rural Pennsylvania because let's say they net an extra 25, 30,000 votes out of Philadelphia County, which is possible, right? I mean, it's a massive county. If you could offset that with, an additional 35 to 50,000 rural votes to offset it, that'll be key come election night. So that's just my view of that state. I actually just drove through it obviously last week or a week and a half ago, going first to Philly and then the DC and then coming back. Saw a lot of, it was interesting actually on the drive back, the way we were going, because we stopped at the Flight 93 Memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We went on US 30, which is the old Lincoln Highway, and saw a lot of Trump signs. Actually, a ton of Trump signs were right by the Flight 93 Memorial there in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. So I am encouraged there, but I did see some Kamala signs and a lot of advertising, I'd say, in Philadelphia at the hotel for Kamala. But I saw plenty of advertising going after her as well. So That to me, Ohio used to be the swing state. Dane. It seems like, bless you, Pennsylvania this time around is going to be that state that makes it, it's a make or break state for both campaigns. And if Trump could pull it off there, it's going to be. You honestly have to question how she's going to find a path to victory. It's going to be ultra tight. It's going to be a very tight one if she could find a way to win.
Well, I'm just looking at the results now. I didn't realize it was 50% for Biden, 48.8% for Trump. And I think you made the point on this last episode that like Biden was the hometown guy with the Scranton edge. So, if you look, Erie and Scranton were both light blue. Those areas could easily flip and make a difference. I don't know. Maybe it's more believable than I realized. And maybe some of the suburban voters come back home outside of Philadelphia, and then you've got a red PA. And if he wins PA, he wins the election. Like that's what it comes down to
Correct.
at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's where I again September 9th, the night before the debate. That's where I have the race
Is tomorrow the
two eighty
debate?
one. It is the debate. So, I think it's a perfect segue to talk about the debate, Dane, because quite frankly, this is the only debate between Harris and Trump that is currently scheduled. And I think we'll kind of get a vibe as to really what the internals look like for Kamala about a week from now. Because if she doesn't have, this debate could go one way or the other. But let's just say for a second, hypothetically speaking, that she doesn't have maybe the best night. She kind of has one of her word salad answers and doesn't really make much sense. Or Trump hits her hard on the flip flops she had and she didn't respond quite well. Or just has some questionable answers. Then I think all of a sudden she's going to be pushing for a second debate. Whereas I think most of the American electorate, Dane, knows Trump, knows what you're going to get. And I don't see much of his support eroding. I don't think he could be an ass of himself, right? He can't do what he did in 2020 in that first debate. Unfortunately, the rules have gone unchanged from the Biden debate from a month or a couple months ago. So I think that will keep him more restrained. And my advice to Trump would be, just avoid. I know what she's going to try to do. She's going to try to get under his skin, try to make him erupt, try to make him say something idiotic or stupid, and then the media is going to run with it because the media is going to want their talking points. Because no matter what happens tomorrow night, they're going to find a way to say positive things for Kamala, right? They are a huge reason Kamala Harris even is as tight as she is in the polls because they gave her this glamorous coverage for the last 6 weeks, had one softball interview, and this is where we're at. So I think if you're a Trump supporter or just a Republican in general, the expectation tomorrow night is going to be from the post debate shows that Kamala's going to win, and they're going to give her positive reviews. Do you agree with me on that, Dane, or do you actually think they would go after her if she had a rough night?
No, they're going to cover for her. I am nervous about this debate because it seems like Trump has the momentum coming into the debate. And I'm afraid that a bad debate could halt that momentum. I actually think he did very well against Biden a couple of weeks ago or a month ago or whatever that was.
Well, he knocked him out of the race, essentially.
He knocked him out of the race, but like he had some goofy answers, but like overall I thought he did very well. I thought he actually handled the abortion question very well, and Biden knew that and moved off of it because he had a good response. So if Trump could replicate that performance, I'd feel good. I am nervous though. I'm very nervous. I think Kamala will have some witty one-liners. And I don't know. I have no idea how it's going to go. I have no idea, but I'm very nervous because, again, I feel like there's momentum building for Trump, and I just don't want him to lose it at the debate. But she seems very nervous as well, so who knows?
I was going to say, who do you think has the most pressure? It's got to be her. She's had, and let me bring this up real quick. I tweeted this out on August 12th. I said, hiding Kamala from press conferences and interviews could be detrimental come debate time. If you get her out there now, which was again August 12th, voters can develop expectations of how she may perform with questions, hiding them, and she sounds like she has over the last 4 years. It could backfire on them like Biden. So in the back of my mind, I still have that thought process, Dane. She's had one softball interview, and this is going to be her reintroduction of sorts to actually answer questions to a large chunk of the American people. And if she goes out there and stumbles, like she inevitably has done at times in certain interviews over the years, which led to her having very high unfavorable numbers over, again, the last 4 years up until the last 6 weeks. I think that could backfire on her. So I think, to me, the pressure is really on her. If I'm Trump, if I'm the Trump team, I'm just telling him, stick to the. I like to use the phrase "stick to the script," but essentially, stick to the script. Don't say anything stupid. You know what you should say. Just don't make it personal. They were even talking about it today on Clay and Buck. Do you think he gives her a handshake?
Yeah, I think he does.
Yeah,
I
I
did he
think
give
he needs
Biden a
to.
handshake?
He did not for Biden, but I just think with her, I think he did with Clinton, right? With Hillary, as
Well, that
much
was
as those
probably
two despise.
COVID. That could have been COVID. Remember
Yeah, but
with
he
Biden?
didn't. He didn't the last in July or whenever that debate was, June or July. I noticed.
Oh, oh, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But
I think he needs to, and if she's the one who just like declines or whatever, I think it looks bad on her. I think if I'm him, I make the effort. Maybe, you know, say a couple nice things. I think he said a few nice things. Remember, like against Hillary Clinton, like they even asked to pose a question to them, like, "What would you say about them?" She's like, she is tough or whatever, like that. Not that I think Kamala's as tough as Hillary. She doesn't have the machine behind her like Hillary did, but you know, maybe say something a little positive there, and then go after her because her record, and I have it in the show notes, Dane. 9 areas in which she shifted her views. I would call them flip flops. Banning plastic straws, mandate for automakers to make electric vehicles, banning fracking, which is huge in Pennsylvania. Like I would be
yeah, it
hitting
is.
that hard. That's huge, especially for Western Pennsylvania,
Yep.
and the exurbs or whatever the hell you call them around Pittsburgh. That's very important there. Mandatory buyback program for assault weapons, decriminalizing crossing the border, reparations for slavery. I can't imagine that playing well in a lot of states. Building a wall on the southwest border, fascinating there. A federal jobs guarantee, and then Medicare for all. So there's plenty for him to go after at her. She's going to try to do her shtick, talk about abortion and this and that, and how he's the worst human being in democracy. This, if I'm Trump and his camp, I would just be hammering her on her flip flopping on all these, just based on whatever the political winds of the day are.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't know if he will. I'm just saying, be
No,
realistic.
I know. I don't
But
know
if we get like 60% of that, I'd be happy.
You're
The
not
one thing
wrong.
that he has on his favor is that they turned off the mic, and
Yes,
that worked very well against Biden. That he doesn't have the mic anymore
that's
on.
huge.
That's
And no
huge.
studio audience. I think that's another important thing because my fear is, and we saw it during 2016 with the Republican primary debates and all that. It just becomes like a spectacle, and I would worry that Trump is most comfortable in front of his people, right, and at his rallies, and kind of getting playing to the crowd a little bit. And my concern there would be he would just be playing to the audience there, and I don't think he needs. Think having the exact same debate rules, which allowed him to have one of the biggest wins of a debate ever. I mean, you knocked out the sitting president from the presidential election, which is remarkable. That few people were talking about how all that came about, but I think that works. I think the rules definitely work in his favor, and will help him prevent from what happened again in 2020 in that first debate where he wouldn't stop. He made an ass of himself. I mean, I could say that as somebody who voted for him, and I think
Yeah,
it cost him.
I think he did. I think 2020 was disastrous. I think it was absolutely disastrous. I think it's part of the reason why he did so poorly in that election because of that debate. I thought he did very
Yeah,
well versus Hillary though, because you'd be in jail. That was good.
that was, and I just remember like the first debate, and then that Access Hollywood comes out, and the whole like, does he stay in the race? Does he not? And like he brings the Clinton people, the women, to the debate, and then like he says like, oh, you'd be in jail and all that. And was that the one where they were like walking around? Remember they had different styles. You had to sit down, you had the podium, and then you had like the kind of like the town hall one where you kind of walk around the stage.
Yeah, that
Is
was
that
that one. Yeah,
yeah?
he was walking around
'Cause
with
I thought
her.
he
Yeah,
pointed like you'd be in jail.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
good. That was really good.
So, but we'll see. But again, outside of the VP debate, there's no other debates scheduled, and early voting starts here very, very soon. So this could be the last major opportunity to greatly change the path of this race. And if I'm Trump again, just try to remain level-headed. And I don't know. It's hard for me to say he could be a statesman, but if he could like just try to be one, and just put some of those undecided voters at ease, I think that honestly, this is I think the major question. If you're an undecided voter, what are you looking for with Trump? You know what policies you're going to get, right? You probably just don't like the guy, right? And so that's why I'm constantly tweeting out like, I think his personality and how he handles himself does matter at this point, because if he's got 48% of the people supporting him, those people probably aren't going to abandon him, Dane. And so for
No,
that let's say 2 to 4% of the voting bloc that's on the fence with him, you know exactly where he stands on the issues, and you probably like some of his issues and how things were in 2016. Your biggest reservation is he's Trump and he can be an ass of himself. And so if he could find a way to not be an ass of himself, as crazy as that sounds, I think that works in his favor. I know I'm making this a lot more simple than it needs to be, but I think that does matter. I
it
mean,
does.
I got a
But
different viewpoint on it, but I don't know. I think that matters.
I do, and I think that would be helpful. But like, I think that these people that are like, I don't vote for Trump because he's presidential are kind of stupid. Like, I'm sorry. Let me just
No, I get that.
and I
Trust me,
get
I
what you're
get it.
saying. You're totally right.
But
Like, you're
the problem.
objectively right. But I'm sick of these people. Like, our country. Can we go into the Haiti thing with Springfield, Ohio?
Yeah. Go ahead. We'll finish
So
off on that.
this is a good area to finish off. So like over the last 24 or 48 hours, it's gone viral on Twitter. And now it's like JD has commented on it, Trump has commented on the New York Times about Springfield, Ohio. So Springfield, Ohio is a town of 60,000 people as of 2020. The refugee resettlement groups brought in Haitians into Springfield, but they didn't just bring in Haitians, they brought in approximately 20,000 Haitians. Now, that number needs to be fact checked, but it's a lot. Um, and it's a third of the size of that town. Okay, and Springfield is a Rust Belt town like Youngstown, Ohio. Can you imagine if 20,000 additional people came in from Haiti into Youngstown? And the locals are overwhelmed. They're having higher insurance costs, rampant crime. Somebody sacrificed a goat at a shop that they had to call the health inspectors for. The Haitians were eating the ducks in the public ponds. They were capturing the ducks and eating them. There are reports, these are unverified as of now, so I want to be careful, that people's pets were getting stolen and they were getting eaten by the Haitians. And keep in mind, Haiti is a country with cannibalism. That's a true statement. That's not a lie. That's real. It's been Haiti plus cannibalism. Um, and 20,000 Haitians have come into this little town. Now, to me, this encapsulates this issue. We've seen a record surge of 20 million immigrants into this country, both legal and illegal. And to me, what is it that makes the third world and the first world the first world? It's the people. At the end of the day, it's people. It's not the soil. It's not the institutions. These institutions are a miasma in space, right? It's the people. And when you take and you change the people, you change the town. If I were to add 20,000 Haitians into Youngstown, I essentially have a mini Haiti in Youngstown. Okay. And
It's a third
it
of the
wouldn't
current
solve.
population.
What's that?
That's a third of the current population.
It's a third of the current population. And in fact, Springfield has 60,000 like Youngstown does. So
Yeah.
it's a really good comp. And by the way, the Catholic Charities in Youngstown wants to make the city a refugee area. Um, and to me, this is the defining issue of the race because Kamala and the Biden-Harris administration, they've overseen total open borders. They gave temporary protected status to the Haitians so you couldn't deport them. And they're seeing the fundamental transformation. If this were to happen in Yugoslavia and the Croatians were doing it to the Bosnians, or the Serbs were doing it to the people in Kosovo, the United States would say this is ethnic cleansing. If Russia took areas of Ukraine and brought in Tartars, right, or Mongolians or Kazakhs and populated in the area because they were loyal to Russia and they gave them thousands of dollars or thousands of rubles, we would say Russia is doing ethnic cleansing. Okay. But when NGOs do it and our own federal government does it, we're afraid to say anything because we don't want to be tarred as racist. And I think like eventually it comes to the point where like if Europe and the United States, but let's use Europe, if Germany is no longer populated by Germans, but if it's populated by Syrians and Turks, it's no longer Germany. You could have the little map say Germany, but it's no longer Germany because Germans make Germany. Same is true with France. Same is true with Italy. Same is true with England. Ireland, would blow up the English and kill the English for tens of years or decades, excuse me, over 100 years. They get independence, and now by 2070, the Irish are going to be a minority in Ireland. Is that country still Ireland if it's no longer occupied by Irish people? It's not. Okay, it's first world mentalities, first world behaviors, first world institutions that matter. And by the way, this isn't just a racial thing. Although race has an element to play in it, there are black people in Springfield that are African Americans who are upset with these Haitians coming into the town. And this has gone viral because they're eating the pets. And like Trump just tweeted about it, JD tweeted about it. But I'm telling you, this is the issue. Okay. It's like, do we have a first world country or not? Where I live, Michael, the traffic has exploded, the population has exploded. And it sucks because we brought in all these people. Like, is the purpose of the United States to import infinite amounts of migrants from the third world, build like McMansion tents, little housing for them? The GDP number goes up, but the country is gone. There's no institution. Like, is that the purpose of our country? Is that why people fought and died in the First and Second World War in Vietnam, so that we can import thousands of Haitians? And I'm sorry, like when Donald Trump said that Haiti was a shithole country, he was absolutely right. I mean that's a statement of fact. It's a shithole country, and the reason Haiti is a shithole country is because it's populated with Haitians and they have a particular culture. Now, can a Haitian person migrate to the United States and assimilate over time and adopt Western values? Sure, but if you bring in 20,000, that assimilation is not happening. So to me, this is the defining issue. And if you have like suburban people that are like, well, Donald Trump is kind of rude and I don't like him and he says bad things, and it's like, we're fighting an existential battle here. Like, get with the times. I don't know, sorry. I just had to bring that up. Have you been following this Springfield thing?
A little bit. I did hear something about it about a month ago. And I guess a point of clarification or fact. So I previously was on the board of Catholic Charities in Youngstown, and I know what you're speaking of. And I've seen allegations about Catholic Charities elsewhere. So like each diocese has like their own. So I can't speak to like some of the accusations I've seen in a lot of states, which if concerned, I will say this. I think what your towns though, it's part of a broader plan from the chamber and all that. Where I don't know if in what is it, Lake to River, the new economic development district, the migrant piece is a very small piece of what they're trying to do from a repopulation effort.
Yeah,
And
it's small now, Michael, but it's
well,
not going to stay small, right? It starts
I
with like,
understand.
yeah, and by the way, like, what is when you bring in 20,000 Haitians to a small town, first of all, you're completely destroying the sense of community and trust and all that social well-being. But then what are you saying to the people of America? Like American citizens, and this isn't a racial thing, this is just a reality. They can't have kids. Like our birth rates are plummeting. and they can't get apartments because they're $2,000 for an apartment, and they can't have they can't like afford food and stuff because we've imported overnight 20 million people in 4-year period. And housing, like, yeah, you can build more houses, but it takes a long time, right? You can import tons of. So, like, why is it always the Chamber of Commerce types that are like, we need to bring in refugees because they're just simply jobs that Americans won't do? Well, I'm sorry, for decades Americans would do those jobs, and now they won't. Maybe you got to pay a higher wage, Chamber of Commerce. Like, God forbid the business owners pay a higher wage because there's demand for labor, right? Like, God for no, 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 no. They can't pay a higher wage. We just got to keep importing Haitians who will work for like $7, and then they send like half of it back to Haiti in remittances. Like, that's like the Chamber of Commerce and the Catholic Charities should be absolutely ashamed of themselves, okay? Because they're a huge facilitator of all these waves of migration. Like, you know, it's just it's sickening. Like, they're like the left and the Catholic Church. They'll import millions of people into a country. They'll get it. Catholic Charities will get a check from the federal government, but the social costs of these people are being dumped on the towns. How's that charitable to the town? Watch the video of like the old lady who's like, I no longer feel comfortable in my own home, right? And I'm like, I'm no longer safe, and I have to move in the town I grew up in. You can thank the Catholic Charities for that. I think it's the Catholic. There's not enough poverty and problems here, and the reason they don't take care of them is because they're not getting subsidized by the federal government. They want those checks to bring the refugees here. I'm sorry, it just. And this is like, if you want to know what got Trump elected in 15 and 16, it's this immigration issue. This is the issue that the establishment Republican types will not touch with a 10-foot pole. Okay. It's this immigration issue, and it's about who we are as a country and who we are as a people that Trump touched in 2016, and that the establishment Republicans, Bush doesn't care. Bush doesn't, because they're all serving him, Arnold Palmer's at the Texas Country Club.
Fired up
Sorry.
tonight, Dane. Now, I will say this, because some of the points you raised were some of the points the callers on Ron Verb had. This was probably about 3 months ago. And the fear would be that, let's say, in the Mahoning Valley. So again, just some background here. There's a repopulation push because there's some major employers who are in the process of opening up here, and the fear is that there's a lack of a workforce right now. As somebody who has to hire people in my position, I do believe there's some truth to that, and the hope is the fear from Ron Verb, I remember from this phone call from this exact day, was it's going to turn into what you're speculating about Springfield. But I just want to clarify, because I know some people on Youngstown Warren Chamber Board who are big Republicans, and if you go through their list, I know they are big supporters of the Republican Party. I can assure you they would not allow happen in Youngstown what has happened elsewhere. I think there's probably people here who would like that to happen. I don't think the people on the chamber or the lake to river or that are going to be on board with it. Because again, like I said, the piece of the repopulation with migrants was less than 3 or 4% of what they were looking for. They want it drastically with people who are from here originally, who have left the area, and then bring in people from the outside, from other parts of the country, maybe with cost of living. So just a point of clarification. I'm just playing a devil's advocate, Dane. But
Sure.
I know I know exactly your concerns, and those would be exactly my concerns as well. And the issue, and that's, I think, the biggest thing as a Catholic. Probably, like, I think by and large on most things Catholic, if you're like truly Catholic on most things, you align with the Republicans. It's that immigration thing, which is like that kicker, right? It's like on
Yeah.
one hand, you want to support those who have come to our country, who want a better life, but on the other hand, can't you just do it legally, right? That's like in my thought process. Like, how do you handle that? But like, if they're here, do you just let them, become homeless, or do you reach out? It's probably the toughest thing as like a Catholic to try to figure out where it stands. But what always gets me there is just come to our country legally, and then yes, we could have resources to assist you to get on live the American dream or try to obtain the American dream.
Yeah, but these Haitians are here legally. Like this is the big that like that's a GOP talking point, and I appreciate what you're trying to say. But the problem is legal immigration. We take in like a million plus legal immigrants a year. Like you have people like tech companies claiming like while they'll lay off American staff, they'll bring in H-1B visas to undercut the American employees on wages, and they'll say we need more legal immigration. Those Chamber of Commerce types, and I don't know if these are your friends, they'll be like, I can't hire workers. God forbid they, raise the wage a couple of dollars, right? They would be attracting, like, people will go where the dollars are. They don't want to do that. They just want to get cheap labor. Um, and that, like, there's a social cost to that. Like, the company that you work for, if they want to bring them, I'm not saying you in particular, but the Chamber of Commerce, let me rephrase it, the Chamber of Commerce types that want to bring the migrants because they can't get the workers and they don't want to pay higher wages, there are social costs with involving bringing in those people, and it's not the Chamber of Commerce that are paying those social costs, right? They don't give a damn if there's crime and the ducks are getting eaten and the pets are getting eaten because they don't live in those neighborhoods. By the way, and this is the big problem I have with those type of Republicans is they don't have to deal with the consequences of their action. Um, so I don't know. I think that this issue, the Springfield issue, is going viral because again, it comes to like look in Aurora, Colorado, Michael. There are Venezuelan gangs seizing apartment complexes, right? Like there are entire swaths of the country where like English as a second language is the dominant instruction for schooling. Like this is unsustainable. It's madness. A lot of it is legal immigration. We just need and like if people can't afford houses, if everybody's bitching that we can't afford a house, why are we bringing in more people? Why don't we pause immigration until people can afford a house again? And then we can, start bringing people back in. Like the immigration, my precept isn't like we need a white ethno state, right? My precept is that like precept or whatever is that immigration should serve the American people. And I think 20,000 Haitians being dropped into Springfield helps the Chamber of Commerce. It helps the employers, but it doesn't help the American people, and therefore it should be opposed. That is my simplest proposition. I think if you put it up to a vote in the Youngstown area, the money you would spend on resettling migrants, the thousands of dollars they get in EBT and other benefits, if you gave it to families who are married to have children, why not do that? Oh, you can't. That's oh no 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 no. We can't pay people to have babies, right? God forbid we do that. But we can pay people thousands of dollars to bring them from like 20,000 miles away and settle them here. It's just mind-boggling. Sorry.
No, and I think you have a valid point when it comes to these Haitians. You can't just mass bring in 20,000. If you're going to have a legal immigration system, you should understand like what maybe the needs of our our country is, our workforce, and strategically bring in individuals maybe it's hard to say on a case by case basis because I'm imagining they get tens of millions, but you figure out what you need. You don't just mass bring in, oh, well, here's 20,000 coming in. They seem like okay people. Let's just bring them. Like, I think you need to find the needs of the country. Maybe to your point, pause it, figure out what those needs are before you mass do it.
Totally agree.
And that to me is the approach. But yeah, I mean, that to me just shows there's a flaw in the legal immigration system. If you're coming in legally, if they're here legally, it doesn't necessarily just mean all's well in the world. You still got to go through a vetting process. And in this case, clearly, it shows that whatever vetting process was used with these people is not appropriate and needs to be revamped in whatever way. So,
Yeah, I mean,
any final thoughts, Dane?
no, I think that this issue, the Springfield, Ohio issue, is going viral for a reason. I would conclude on this. This is the issue that will win Trump the Rust Belt. Okay. Tax cuts, no one cares. Okay, nobody cares about tax cuts. This immigration issue and what your communities are going to look like for you and your children and your grandchildren, that America looks and sounds and feels like America, right? That is what will win Trump day. So if you're asking like how does Trump win the debate, and I agree with you tactically, I think you're 100% correct. He's got to be statesmanlike. He's got to be restrained. But on a strategy level, like what wins this issue right here? Like this encapsulates the Trump movement. It differentiates Trump from the other Republicans, and it like the Mike DeWine Republicans, who Mike DeWine brought a lot of these guys in here. Okay, Mike DeWine's going to be dead in like 5-10 years. He's not going to have to deal with Haitians. And I guarantee you, the community that Mike DeWine lives in probably has zero Haitians. It's really funny how that works out. This is the issue that will like this is the Trump issue, right? So like this is really important that this is going viral now, because if anything's going to put him over the edge, it's going to be issues like this and others, similar to it. So it's one to get fired up about. But this is the Trump movement. Like this is it. Like I think a lot of Republicans still don't get the Trump music. It's a movement. It's about this. Like it's about Springfield, Ohio should not be Port-au-Prince. It can't be. Okay, Youngstown, Ohio should not be Burma or wherever they were going to bring people from. um, anyways, there you go.
Well, I think to your point, Dane, if tomorrow Trump brings this up, then immigration comes into full focus. And again, she was in charge of the border, and that's not the path that Kamala wants us to be about. That's not.
She's got a horrible record.
Yeah,
totally right.
And she was in charge of the border. So I think you're in terms of an issue that she wants to avoid the most, but this story being fully in the public eye right now, that would make sense to bring that up and see kind of how she reacts and then hammer her. And be like, listen, you were in charge of immigration the last 4 years. You created this mess. You did nothing to solve it. You did nothing to fix it. Why should the American people give you 4 years to fix something that you were in charge of that you clearly made worse? That's how at least I would.
I agree.
It.
I agree.
All right. Well, on that note, we went a little long. Actually, no, hour and 15 minutes. So right on schedule, really. So appreciate everybody for listening. Again, thank you, Dane, for your analysis. We'll be very curious to see how the debate goes tomorrow, and we'll have a follow-up episode here in the next week or two to kind of talk about things as we approach middle of September. Before you know it here, Dane, it'll the trees are going to start changing colors. And yeah. But I got my Trump sign out front in my neighborhood. I like to drive around on my way to work. Well, I drop the kids off and kind of get a pulse on things. But I will say this. I'd be shocked if Kamala wins Mahoning County.
Oh yeah, I would too.
I
would actually too. Yeah,
it's amazing. There's actually one street about 2 minutes from my house here in Boardman. There's literally, I counted because I was just amazed because I looked the one day. I'm like, are you serious? There's that many signs, and I drove it. And it's not a big street, 11 Trump signs and 4 Harris signs in a very small residential street. So clearly whoever lives over there probably got the neighbors fired up one way or the other. But that just kind of gives you an idea. And Boardman's kind of one of those suburbs that could kind of go maybe slightly Republican. And I just don't see the enthusiasm going away for the Republicans. And I fully expect Trump to win here by even more than he did in 2020, which was like 3 points in Mahoning County. I think he could get to maybe 54, 46, 53, 47 type thing, maybe win by 6 to 7 points. That's my goal.
So real quick, and then I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I know we have to end the episode, but if Trump does better in Ohio, like you're saying, Bernie Moreno, we need to have another talk about Bernie Moreno race.
Yeah.
Because that becomes, I think there's something going on there, but probably
there is. Yeah, we will, and I'll just hint that there's some polling that definitely shows that race within margin of error, and even there was a poll that had him ahead. So it's kind of mimicking 2022 Vance Ryan, where Ryan was up. I think last episode we said he was up by 5 to 6 points in the head-to-head, and then over September into October, once these voters actually start figuring out who they're going to vote for, you start seeing it kind of come together. And I think Moreno is a race based on some of these other ones where I do think the Republicans are in trouble in some of these states. I do think Moreno is the best option outside of West Virginia and Montana. I don't really want a 51-49 majority because, you have some wishy-washy Republicans. You're going to need a Moreno in there. So I'd like to honestly see Trump, selfishly, I'd like to see him in Youngstown and Toledo to kind of kill two birds with one stone. Not only to help Moreno, but those are also media markets that cover important parts of neighboring states. Obviously, the Youngstown media market has Western Pennsylvania, which is important, from Erie down to Pittsburgh. That's a very important stretch of the state. And then Toledo has Southern Michigan outside of Detroit. And I kind of would like to see Trump maybe just go to one of those two. He went to Montana. I don't see why he can't come to Ohio and try to, kill two birds with one stone. That's my approach. That would be my advice to anybody in the Trump campaign. Make it happen.
I agree. I think there's just too many priorities that's low. But I agree. I think, yeah, you get Bernie Moreno in there, and you've got a 52, maybe 53 Senate, which is really helpful. So,
yeah. All right. Well, on that note, we'll wrap it up, everybody. Again, thanks for listening to episode 43. Tell your family, your friends, coworkers about our episode. I'll try to get the podcast up at some point tomorrow, being the September 10th, and encourage you to give it a like, like us on Facebook, follow us on X, and subscribe on YouTube, and make sure you share this episode once it is up. The archive of it is up tomorrow. So thanks, everybody.